You may have seen today's guest on the skateboard, playing the trombone, practicing jiu-jitsu, or the day-to-day activities of a Bellevue Police Department law enforcement officer. Craig Hanaumi is today's guest in the Self-Defense Journey series. As a brown belt jiu-jitsu instructor, I cannot think of anyone better to be chatting with about the importance of jiu-jitsu in law enforcement. Thanks for listening in, and let's get straight into it. Before we get started today, I want to say thank you for every single like, comment, recommendation, and a very special thank you to my listener support group. If you like what we do here at Off the Deep End Podcast, please consider checking out the listener support tab on our channel's anchor link. Without you, we would not be able to continue the great work we're doing with these conversations, breaking down boundaries and helping heal each other by sharing our stories, our trials, our tribulations, and how we process them. Let's jump straight into this episode. Are you thinking about making a podcast? Spotify has a platform that lets you make one, and if I can figure it out, you definitely can too. You can create your own content all in one place for free with zero hangups and even earn money as soon as you get started. Spotify lets you record and edit episodes from your phone or computer so you can go mobile, just like I enjoy to do. My favorite thing about it is that you can create video episodes if you wish and upload them to wherever podcasts are heard. You can even set up subscriptions or, if you're like me, listener support options for listeners to help you grow. I 10 out of 10 recommend the Spotify for Podcasters app. Or, why don't you just step over to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started on your own podcast. All right, what's happening, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Off the Deep End Podcast. I am joined by the one and only Officer Craig from Bellevue Police Department. He does a lot of things that I admire, and I hope that it can spread through the rest of the law enforcement community, bridging the gap between people and law enforcement officers, also taking time to make sure the youth have a huge impact on the youth. So I appreciate your time, my brother. Thank you for joining us today.
Appreciate it, Eddie. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So I know you're coming up on 20 years in law enforcement now. Why don't you touch a little bit on what that's been like and things that you enjoy, things that you're going to miss when it's all said and done, and things that you are going to continue to do afterwards.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. September 2003 was my start date with Honolulu PD, and I'm born and raised on Oahu, and I worked there for 3 years, mostly on the windward side of the island, which is Waimanalo, Kailua, Kaneohe, Kahalu, Ka'ava, Hau'ula, Laie, all the way up to Kahuku. And I left there in 2006 to 7, and then I started working for Bellevue PD since then till now. So almost 20 years, and it went by super fast. And honestly, I have no idea what I want to do afterwards. I'm not actually even thinking about that yet. Still feel like I have a lot of stuff to do now. And I don't know, my body's still holding up, thankfully. Very grateful for that. And I'll keep going until something else better comes up, or I don't know, my body breaks down or something like that.
Yeah, it's hard for the body to break down when you work out and train pretty vigorously. I notice a lot of cold weather training, going from cold to hot, that induces stem cell activity in your body. So the hot and cold training with the sitting out in the snow, going to hot jacuzzis and other practices, they keep you young for life.
Well, I don't know if it does that or not, but I just try to copy other people that, and then the validity that comes out of stuff like that from people like Dr. Huberman, it helps out to have scientific data that validates it. But that one, I feel like I do mostly just for resiliency and just kind of mental toughness and comfort and discomfort. And I think the idea came from, I got it from Hiron, who has a jacuzzi and a cold plunge. And then I think Dr. Huberman mentioned it on his podcast as well, as far as when people were talking about duration of exposure, he mentioned the idea of doing intervals of hot and cold. And it's the hardest part is, I think, ending on the cold.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with that. There's nothing like a brisk morning here in Seattle, in the Seattle area. I cannot tell you how many times I've been outside working on an elevator or an escalator, and that breeze comes in, cooking that 20 degrees, a nice, beautiful 20 degrees, right down
Yeah.
my neck. So it definitely
Yeah.
hits
Well,
you.
if you're working outside, you're doing cold exposure already.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes. And it does make you tougher. I believe in that. So speaking on toughness, you happen to be currently a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and also a Gracie instructor. You spend a lot of time training. What is the benefit of doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and how does it tie into law enforcement? And is it a crucial aspect of it for you? Do you wish more people practiced it? What do you think?
Yeah, jujitsu is that's the only realistic way I'd probably have a chance to protect myself against a bigger, stronger person, whether I was doing police work or not. And the way it applies to law enforcement is that it is a martial art that is scalable. The the force that is used is scalable, and that is, I mean, there's no other art that is able to do that. Meaning you can modulate the force from minimal to maximum and everything in between based on what the other person is doing. And there isn't really striking based arts are really effective, but strikes cannot be scaled. So I think the art and the emphasis on control is huge as well. And yeah, I don't know. I just cannot see another thing that is more transferable to our work because it has those two components, and then the survival and escape um, principles and concepts that come with it too, and techniques, of course. So there's a lot of transference to our job and anything almost.
Definitely, definitely. I think martial arts are something that everybody can benefit from some form of martial art, but Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I've seen a lot of different times where it's benefited a law enforcement officer in a tough time dealing with somebody much larger than themselves, or trying to make sure that the situation doesn't escalate. When you have somebody in side control, or you're doing weapon retention training, all these things are going to apply to the job, of course. What is your favorite part about Jiu-Jitsu in general?
My favorite part about jujitsu is using it to empower other people. That has for the last couple year and a half or so, that has been kind of like the main hype. And I mean, it's a personal development, of course, but I think if a person has taught someone else, I don't know what is comparable to that. I don't think anything else is comparable to that to me, because not only is it benefiting me by helping to teach and refine instructor skills and development, but it's giving somebody something that they can use that they didn't have before. And I don't know if you can top that. That's the ultimate.
Mm. Absolutely. I think that the effect you have on other is absolutely the most valuable currency that we're ever going to have in life overall.
Yeah.
I noticed that you're doing these women's self-defense classes, and I want to say that I admire that. I think it's very, very important that we empower others, like you said, to be able to protect themselves and give them the confidence to um, not freeze or not question themselves, to not have the fleeting thought of, oh no, what's going to happen next? They already have a plan in their mind. Self-defense is not just for the guys in the kung fu movies, or self-defense isn't just for John Wick, it's for everybody. And I really admire what you're doing, helping other people create that environment, that safe place to make those mistakes and grow from them, and to learn how to be more tenacious and powerful. Tell me a little bit about these self-defense classes. What's the impact of it on other people?
Yeah. This we started doing them in May, I think, May of 2022, and I think detractor, the main detractors of any kind of workshop is that it is too infrequent. Right? You cannot get reflexes from one class or one workshop or one anything of any skill. And I think, a portion of why people have them is to introduce whatever it is to another person. And then from that introduction, the idea is that they're supposed to hopefully enjoy it, and then they'll want to do some more. But in and of itself, right, a one-time workshop or training session, it's not going to be, it's not going to fix anything. It's just going to give a person exposure to something and hopefully at an introductory level, and then hopefully after that they become interested. So aside from that introduction, I guess to take it a step further, well, what if we had regularly occurring classes, regularly occurring workshops, not just once a year or twice a year? What if we had them once a month and expand from there? So luckily my position allows me the luxury of time to coordinate stuff like that, and also luckily our administration supports it, and the effect that it has had has been pretty awesome. Pretty sure we're the only department in the world that is doing it right now, and the people who participate, I mean, it's so interesting how jiu-jitsu as an art, if you ask any person who practices it, it was made for a person to protect themselves against a bigger, stronger person. And generally speaking, women are not bigger, stronger people compared to guys. So if you can pick a population that needs it more, it'll be that population. But ironically, that's not happening in a lot of schools. And so it's just a need that I thought we could help support. There was an interest, and there is an interest. And I think since this coming workshop tomorrow, the 12th one we're going to do, looks like we will pass 600 participants after that
Wow.
workshop.
Now that
So
is
we should,
phenomenal.
yeah, a little bit over 100 people, 100 women. And that's actually the highest. We had 110. And I mean, I'm not even surprised. I mean, I think that's the amount that would be expected for something that is free and good. So, I mean, we'll keep doing it until we don't have time anymore, which will hopefully not be ever a problem. And the neatest thing is, I think almost half of the group usually are mothers and daughters. And then we have the 11-year-old, 10-and-a-half-year-old, up to I think the oldest participant we had was Mary, and she was 82. And every age in between, every job in between, every demographic, high school students, middle school students, college students, teachers. Our mayor participated, our HR director, human resources director, IT director, a bunch of other, maybe about 20 other people within our city. It was emailed internally, and it's been awesome. I think the furthest away a person came from it was, I'm embarrassing, not familiar with the geography here, but whatever is further away from here, Olympia or Gig Harbor, there's women that came from both of those places.
Wow. Well, that is absolutely excellent. You're definitely making an impact in the community. 600 is not an easy number of people for anybody to count, even 600 of their own friends, let alone 600 people coming together, not knowing each other, getting into that weird, uncomfortable zone where they might not feel like they know everybody in the room, and breaking down those boundaries and working together towards a common goal, which is self-betterment. And self-betterment, fitness, self-defense classes, they're all so great. I really like how you have the entire community coming together for a common goal. I think that's very important.
Yeah. Now the best part is it's mutually beneficial for us. Our coworkers get to be featured as instructors, and not just locally, our department's law enforcement, but other departments' law enforcement. We've had law enforcement officers from about 1, 2, 3, 4 agencies participate. This coming Sunday, there'll be an officer from Customs and Border Patrol on the federal side, and a bunch of recruits, a few applicants, a few potential applicants. And I mean, people in the community get to know us, so we get to know them. And I mean, there's a win all the way around. It's not really that, I can't think of a negative thing that can come out of it. I think the caveat is that it has to be presented in a way. I mean, we're not having 60 people on average by accident. 60 women on average. That's not by chance. It's because I have to give credit to the people that I learned it from, like Henner, Hidon, their wives. That's how much people go to their women in power classes. They average about 50, 60 women per class, every class. And that's not by accident either. So it's because of the way the class is structured and framed, and the way that it is presented. Because I mean, I think unfortunately that's part of the reason why there's not too many women who do jiu-jitsu in general. Like, why is that? Why is it that the art that is the most effective art for a person to protect themselves against a bigger, stronger person does not have majority of women participating in it?
Mm.
Why not?
Yes, and I definitely see what you're saying there, brother. I think that when you are able to deliver something pure to the world and put it out there, people are going to latch onto it naturally. So I know I can't attend the women's self-defense class, but I'd love to come and respectfully observe if that would be okay deep later down the road. I know I'm going to be directing a few of my lady friends to that class as well, because creating that environment where ladies are able to be in their own comfort zone and get a little bit uncomfortable with it and deep dive into that moment that bothered them in the past that they've experienced, because all of them have experienced it. And it's a sad these numbers are sad, talking about domestic violence, people being preyed upon or harassed in the street. Our ladies deserve to feel supported and to be supported, and I think jiu-jitsu can definitely be a great way of making that happen.
Yeah, like I said it before, I mean, there's no other art that is scalable, which is the main benefit. There's tactics that can be effective from other arts, but they may not be appropriate or even legal depending on what the circumstances. So, like, if a person was doing something inappropriate, one response could be to do an eye gouge. It's like, okay, our eye gouge will, if you do it, effectively, will cause a significant injury.
Mm.
And the action of the person may not warrant them receiving a significant injury. And I think that's the problem with not just those kind of tactics, but any kind of striking based response is not scalable. Because if you scale a strike, meaning like you deliver a strike that has not an effective result, which means, I mean, I don't know how you can have an effective strike without injury. One without injury is probably not effective.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's a dilemma with punches and kicks and anything, is that it's either going to hurt the person or it's not going to hurt the person.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't hurt the person, it's not effective. So that's kind of like the downside. And then that's presuming you can deliver effective strikes in the first place, and that the recipient has the pain receptors to be affected by it.
100%.
So that those are all variables that are out of, that's not something that can be even controlled by the person protecting themselves. And that's, doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means it doesn't fit every situation. It doesn't fit a lot of situations, if you really think about it.
Yes, I definitely agree. The right tools are going to allow you to have the right approach to every single situation, and you want to have the right tools for every situation. I know that you do a tumultuous amount, a just absolute heaping load of community outreach with what you do normally, and also what you do when you're off the clock. Why don't you tell me a little bit about playing trombones and hanging out with the kids, skateboarding, helping them reach a level of comfortability with law enforcement at all, when in a world filled with so much anti-cop rhetoric? How do we bridge the gap as a community? How do we help people come together regardless of whatever they do in their day job?
That's a big challenge, right? And presuming, well, first of all, it has to be reciprocal, meaning that there's not a person that can do whatever you want to call it, outreach or connect with anybody, if the other person isn't reciprocal to or open to that. It's not even possible. So, and some people will not want to participate with that. And as much as a person wants to engage and interact, if they're not willing to listen or connect, it's not going to happen. Luckily, most people are open-minded, and the challenge is, I don't know, what ways can a person from our line of work, I guess, humanize themselves? Because there's a perception of our job that may or may not be accurate. And that goes for people that are from the United States and other countries. So how do you, I guess, I don't know, how do you make people forget, how do you make people look past the uniform? That's not easy. And I think the easiest way to do, like some of the examples you mentioned, is through activities. And just happens that the ones that you mentioned is the things that I enjoy, which is the ones that a person would probably want to do if they're going to do a community engagement, right? Well, what does it make sense if I picked, I don't know, ice hockey or something like that? I don't ice skate. I could do it, but I don't know. I don't like doing that. That's not my thing. So just picking things that you're already interested in makes it much easier to do, because that's what you would do anyways. You would do that as your own interest, and then connecting with people through those activities is a very easy, organic way to build relationships. And the whole point of it is not even, I don't know, the goal is, I guess that's the byproduct, right? Positive interaction. But I think all of those activities that you mentioned, skateboarding, trombone, jiu-jitsu, it's just all things and ways to figuratively and sometimes literally connect with other people. That's it. Just about, if that's the goal, if that's the intention, like my goal is not to build better relationships, is not to improve community police interactions, it's just to connect. That's it. And everything else is the byproduct of that intention. And I think if a person goes about it in a way that is different, like, I can do this to make this person like me or like the police or something. I mean, if you do it like that, it's not as good. And I think people can feel when that's an intention like that. So I don't know. I think Henner, I don't know if he's going to come out with it, but the idea of leading with love, you know, if the intention is coming from the right place, I think people can tell. And if it's not coming from the right place, people can tell. So luckily we have the things in place to facilitate building those relationships through those activities already. Like our city has the indoor park, which is staffed by city employees who skate. There's skate parks that are run out of the indoor park over the summer, and that those skate parks, the week-long skate camps are, I mean, they're run by the staff, and I just show up to supplement and support it, and it's easy. I mean, to me, it's easy. It's just I show up and let the connections begin. And I don't know. I mean, I'm just being. I mean, it's just being myself. Just what did I enjoy doing when I was a kid every day? Skateboarding. What did I enjoy doing when I was in middle school and high school and college, playing trombone? What do I enjoy doing now? Jiu-jitsu, exercise. And I mean, if you pick the things you enjoy, it's easy to do outreach. I mean, because you would do those things on your own time for free anyways. So I don't have to fake like I like it, because I do like it. And I think sharing stuff with people is it's the easiest, most I think effective way to connect, because I don't even have to try. Like you just do it, and you just connect with people who also do that same thing. I mean, my gosh, it's just automatic bridge building.
Excellent. I know that being authentic, being raw, being yourself is definitely a great way to find a common ground with another person. We all live in a world of social media. We all live in a world of technology. We all live so separated, especially after what happened in 2020 with Rona. And I know that it's extremely important for human beings to have these connections with each other. So I really admire the work you do. Can you give me a couple examples of how that byproduct, that effect has shown up?
Shown up in what?
In just doing your community outreach. So when you're out skateboarding with a kid, what's the most beneficial part of it for that child? What do they take away from it? What do you see in their family? What 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 do you inspire in other people when you find common ground with somebody?
That's a good question. I almost feel like you have to ask the other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know what they. Um, I mean, I think what it does is it makes a person feel comfortable enough to share something that could be potentially uncomfortable for them to share.
Mm-hmm.
That's the main benefit. Um, Trust. Like if a person had something that's happening to them at home, if you're talking about a young person, they're more likely to disclose something to an advocate or a person that they feel comfortable with. That's pretty common sense, right? And I think the reverse of that is a person may not tell anybody at all. And I think if we know by probability that there's certain people in situations to their home or whatever situation their setting is, it's not ideal. And I think when we connect with a person, they may not feel that way about the entire police department because they don't know the entire police department. But if something were to happen, which has happened in the past, they're more likely to tell a person that they feel comfortable with. And I mean, why is that important? Is that if we're going to advocate for a person and hold another person responsible for doing something to harm that person, we won't even know about it unless the person who that happened to is comfortable enough to share that with us. And by being comfortable with that dynamic, the whole investigation is easier. Right? Every piece of it is easier, not just for us, but for that person too. I mean, if you can imagine a stranger that you had no idea who they are or anything about them, that you have to disclose something to them that's very uh, uncomfortable. That's not easy for anybody, and it's so difficult that it makes a person not do it at all sometimes. And then if they don't have them, that's I guess a person's right to do. But then if they don't share, who's going to advocate for that person? Nobody. So I mean that's not even the reason. The main reason is just it builds positive relationships, and that's generally better. But one of the byproducts is that if something were to happen, then we have a connection with the person already. And I mean, yeah, without citing specific examples, it has happened many, many times over the past several years. All different situations that would not be possible if it weren't for the investment of time in the beginning. And the whole point is the investment of time is not going to be, you don't know if there's even going to be a return, right? Like any investment, you put in that amount of time and you hope that it's going to return somehow, some way, some positive way, but there's no way to guarantee it. And there's no time frame for when it will return. But when it does, you cannot put a price on it. Like it's not even possible to do or even achieve without that. The front loaded investment, which is hard to quantify too, which is another reason why it's so difficult for people to do. Because how do you quantify that time on an Excel sheet?
You can't.
What column is it under? So that's a challenge, right? I mean, it's easier to quantify anything else almost, right? Reports, arrests, traffic stops, citations. Um, I don't know. How do you quantify the time spent to engage and build a relationship with a person? I mean, this just what is that one? That's just one on the column, right?
Mhm. I mean,
Doesn't look
I
like that.
yeah, I would definitely say that's one of those priceless acts when you're able to establish a repertoire with somebody in the community and they have that level of trust built where they're able to come to you when they are in a spot where they're in danger or just to see you and not have bad thoughts about you are because you have a uniform on that says Bellevue Police Department or Linwood Police Department or any police department. I think that it's hard. You can't put a price tag on it. You can't. There's no Excel spreadsheet that's going to match that. I think it's just priceless.
Yeah, and that's why people. I feel like the reason why connected to that is why it takes the amount of time it takes to do that ideally is a significant amount, and most of the time that's not even feasible to offer, because and even presuming there was great staffing in agencies, which a lot of times there isn't, you can't predict when there's going to be time to do that, especially if it's in a patrol capacity, because that's not your primary function. Your primary function is responding to 911 calls. So if that's the primary function, you have to be available to respond to 911 calls, which means that nothing from a patrol capacity can be planned out in advance. Like you can't schedule anything. I mean, you can schedule it, but you have to schedule it and preface it by saying, well, I might not be there. Or if I'm there, I only can stay for like 2 minutes sometimes. But other than that, it's very hard to pre-plan anything because of the role that like typical patrol officer would have, which is not, spend half an hour or an hour of time every Monday with some group of people. Like that would be ideal, but you can't do that.
I definitely understand. Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard to kind of dial in that for any management purposes whatsoever.
Yeah.
For
having said that, it's still possible. You just have to accept that, well, I might have to only do it for 2 minutes today or 5 minutes today, or I can do it for 15 minutes today, but tomorrow 0. And that's kind of like the approach that you would have to have if you were in patrol and wanted to start building relationships. And in some places, in some time frames, in some areas of the city, you can't, because you will have literally no time, or maybe like a minute or two of in between, depending on how what area, like I said, how busy it is. But I feel like if somebody wanted to do it, I think that what is incentivizing that? What if you're looking at quantifying data again, talking to one person for half an hour, if you were to tally something, would just be one, right? If I had, there's a column, like a column that said like people contacted, you talk to one youth for an hour about how important it is to stay in school or not use drugs, and that's an hour of time right there. There's one contact. That doesn't look that good if a person was to tally anything, right? Because in an hour, what else could be done in an hour? A lot of other stuff. And so I don't know. I think there's a challenge to how do you incentivize doing something that has very unpredictable investment of return, if any, and is not really quantifiable on an Excel sheet, or it is quantifiable, but it's not actually indicative of what it's doing on the sheet, right? If I talk to 3 people like that, that's only 3 things. And if I took like 3 hours, doesn't look like a lot. So that's not easy to do. I think how do you show the value of that? It's not, I don't know if it's even possible on that kind of format. You'd have to kind of write it out in a kind of narrative style, or they would have to give some kind of feedback in a written format about the impact of that, or their parent or whoever it is, right? That kind of one makes it really, really clear how important it is. But if you don't have that, how is you going to know, right? You really won't. Even the feedback we do for the self-defense workshops, I mean, the most amazing feedback in emails are the ones that are coming from people who are participating in it. Because otherwise, how would you know what it's doing or what it's not doing? You wouldn't. You would have to just guess. And I think it's easy for us to be like, hey, this is really good. We're getting a lot of feedback. But if this comes from another person, I think it's that much more powerful. So anyway.
Yeah. I definitely understand. And I think it's important that everybody receives feedback for the stuff they put out to the world. So you doing that outreach, I would love to see more stories about from the parents, more stories from from ladies of these self-defense courses that you're putting on with your crew, and I'd love to read them and just see the personal impact, because I always get super inspired about stuff like that. One thing that I was wondering is that if someone came to you and said, "Hey, you know, I'm really thinking about, I saw you do, I've been living in the Bellevue area for a while. I've been seeing the work you were doing with outreach. I was wondering about joining the Bellevue Police Department. Where should I get started? I'm just wrapping up high school, thinking about going to college. What classes should I take? Should I be getting into fitness? Where do you direct somebody when they approach you like that?"
Well, from that age range, in high school, I would say college is, I guess, generally better for, I guess, learning stuff. Not necessary. I mean, you can be educated and not even be a good person, but there's a pay incentive to having a 4-year degree. So just by that in itself, I mean, I would say to do it if it's affordable and feasible for you to do, because the return is, your base pay is pretty significantly increased with a degree. Does a person need one to be a good officer? I would say absolutely not. Some of the best officers I know only have high school diplomas, and they're phenomenal. If a person was that age, I would say, yeah, besides school, getting at some point exposure to a job or activity that interacts with people in some capacity. Could even be volunteer, it doesn't matter. But interacting with other people to demonstrate that you can interact with other people in a constructive, positive way. Not everybody can do that, right? And people who can do that are not always good at that in the beginning. And how do you get better at that? Well, do the thing that you're not good at some more. And then staying physically fit. I think the physical fitness component is the only piece of the hiring process that a person knows exactly what it is in advance. So in that regard, it's the easiest. But at the same time, if a person doesn't exercise at all, ever, that's the hardest part. And then all the other steps, I mean, there's many steps to getting hired besides that, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't even worry about those other ones, because they're only addressed or completed after you pass the previous ones, which are the ones connected to physical fitness and the written test, you know, which a person should be able to pass if they graduated from high school. And do criminal justice classes help? I mean, I don't think they would hurt, but like I said, I mean, there's a lot of amazing officers who did not major in criminal justice. I didn't major in, I just have I have a BA in psychology, and then there's people who graduated with a high school diploma and they're amazing. So other than the pay incentive, I think it's a benefit to have familiarity with some pieces of it, because there could be a definite advantage. And for some positions, like I think being an administrative position, like a captain, major, or chief, you may have to have a graduate level degree or at least a bachelor's in something. So if you wanted to eventually do that, that would be a prerequisite. But if the goal is to just get into this line of work, then that would be it on that side. And then of course the other things like not getting arrested and not, I mean, I think the difficulty of getting hired is the entire person's life gets assessed. That's not just criminal history, it's work history, it's credit history, transcripts, even relationship history. The whole life of a person is reviewed. And I'm just speaking on our department. I'm presuming many other places do it in similar ways, but it's not as simple as, well, I never got arrested before, so I'm good to go. There are many people who have zero criminal history that do not get hired. So I think, like I said, considering all of those pieces, like if a person had poor work history, that might be a disqualifier. How do you fix poor work history? Well, you have a duration of time that passes when you have good work history. And same thing, like how you fix any other piece of a person's life. Good, they have no criminal history for an extended period of time. That obviously demonstrates that you're not making bad decisions. So I think those things all need time though. So that's the hardest part. If a person doesn't have that, that doesn't automatically disqualify them. But how do you demonstrate that you have good history of anything? Well, time. And time cannot be condensed to fast forward. Unlike physical fitness, is you can, if you didn't do enough push-ups, you could practice push-ups for 4 or 5 or 6 months and then significantly improve your ability to do that. But in 4 or 5 or 6 months, you cannot significantly improve your work history. Right? That would take years. Just like credit history, just like any other thing. Which is why I think that those are the other pieces of the hiring process that are challenging sometimes for people, because they say, well, what should I do? I say, well, to improve some aspect, it's not anything immediately done. I mean, outside of obviously don't do the thing that is not a good decision. And then do that for whatever amount of time that you can show, because what amount of time is it? That's kind of arbitrary, right? What amount of time would pass to demonstrate that you now have good work history? Like maybe a person got fired like 2 or 3, 4 times. Hopefully not that many times, but if they did, what amount of time would need to pass before they demonstrate, okay, this person clearly has demonstrated that they are, whatever things they were doing before, they're not doing anymore. I mean, is 6 months enough time to demonstrate that?
No, definitely not.
Well, yeah, and then the challenge, right? What amount of time is enough time? Right? And same thing for anything, even criminal history. Criminal history doesn't automatically disqualify a person, but if somebody committed some crime and 6 months from that point they applied, that's kind of close in time frame, right? That's different from somebody shoplifted when they was in like middle school and they're 25 now. So the duration of time that passes is definitely an indicator of a change in behavior, right? The problem is you can't fast forward that time, right? That has to pass. And I think the other challenge is there's components of our job that many people typically don't have simultaneously, like the ability to talk to people and physical fitness. I mean, there's many jobs that require both, right? But that's not necessarily things that go hand in hand. And the other skill sets in our work is very disconnected to other things, which is learned in the academy and in-house in training. But I think the idea of connecting with people and building relationships, right? I think a lot of people enjoy that. Some people don't enjoy that. But if you do enjoy that, you also would have to enjoy, not enjoy, but potentially have to end up physically closing the distance and controlling somebody and holding them down. And people who engage and enjoy working with people, they may not enjoy that piece, right? That's why a person who has work experience or training in social work, like, we would love to have every single person in our agency or any law enforcement have bachelors of arts in sociology or psychology. That'd be amazing. The problem is how much people who would be majoring in those fields would want to do police work. Very few. So that's the dilemma, right? You kind of have the education and the training piece without the desire to do the thing. And then you also have to have the person who is able to complete the hiring process, which is not easy by itself too. So the amount of people who want to do the work we do, who are also qualified, meaning they can pass the hiring process, that amount is a small amount. And I don't know what the current ratio is of people who are able to pass a hiring process and the amount of vacancies, but it's some ridiculous number, some unbelievable ratio. I think the last time I heard one, our chief in 2018 he said that for every one qualified applicant nationwide, there are 300 vacancies. So that was back before everything shut down and before, to me, when the sentiment of law enforcement was was super, super negative. So I don't know what it is now, but it's not any better. So at the best, it's 1 to 300, which I highly doubt it is that good.
And that's wild too, because I think about often what would happen if someone was breaking in my home in the middle of the night. Who are you going to call? You're going to call 911. You're going to try to get your family to safety. Are you going to try to defend your home? Are you going to be responsible with it? You never know who's going to show up.
That's, I mean, I'm thinking that one, that's on you, right? That's on the individual. You can of course call, but I mean, initially the amount of time it's going to take is going to be, it's still going to be a few minutes, right? At the best case. And I think the ones that is more a better example is like if there's a thing that's happening and you're witnessing something. I mean, especially if it's to a person who's unable to protect themselves. I mean, you could intervene yourself, but many people are not comfortable doing that. And if that person is not comfortable doing that, then who's going to be the advocate for that person who's trying to protect themselves physically or whatever way? Maybe it's an old person or a very young person, a person who doesn't have the financial capability to afford means of protecting themselves. I mean, who's going to advocate for those people? I mean, there really isn't anybody else besides law enforcement to do that right now. And ironically, I think if you remove that component from communities, the most negatively impacted community is going to be the people who will not have financial means to afford stuff like private security, like possessing a firearm or some other self-defense tool. Like if you cannot afford to buy one or have an alarm or have a private security or have whatever, it's on you. And if you are 70 years old or 6 years old, I mean, that's not realistically a feasible age that you're gonna be able to protect yourself. And if you can't, then who's gonna do it? So I don't know. I don't know if people, I mean, I'm sure people think that through, and if there's whatever sentiment of people that's against our work, I mean, I'm sure they have an answer for that, but that's the first thing I think of. Like all the people who are unable to advocate for themselves, protect themselves physically, there's really nobody else to advocate for those people if you remove law enforcement. Like there's literally nobody who's going to hold another person who committed a crime against that population accountable.
It's definitely needed too. It's absolutely needed. I know that hiring is something that is an issue nationwide. Just like you said, 1 in 300, it probably isn't even scraping the surface of the issue we're facing now, because you use that as reference from before this major decline in how the populace views law enforcement. One thing that I wanted to touch on before we kind of wrap things up is that the jiu-jitsu portion of law enforcement. We already know it's very, very important because it can be used. We can scale it up or scale it down depending on the situation. It absolves deadly force in some situations. You don't have to use it. You can use it to control somebody much larger than yourself. It's a great tool for weapon retention and all these things. So what would you say to somebody who is still on the fence? Maybe a young person, maybe an older person on the fence about getting into jiu-jitsu, who thinks it's cool, who sees all your videos, sees videos from people like Clutch over there at Kindred Jiu-Jitsu, and they know where Edmonds Gracie is, but they don't know what to do. What would you say to somebody who's still on the fence about getting into that form of martial arts?
Depends on if I knew them personally. I would try to coordinate a introductory class with them. I mean, if they're that interested, and presuming they're willing to try it, then I would facilitate that. And I feel like the advantage is I hope I would be able to scale it and present it in a way that makes a person believe that they can do it. And I think that's the most important thing. That's more important than if they're even doing it right or not. Because if a person leaves with the belief that they can do something, what's going to happen?
They're going to go do it.
They're going to come back.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. It doesn't even matter. Like, think about if a person was shown jiu-jitsu or exposed to jiu-jitsu and felt the effectiveness of it, meaning like they got submitted like 50 times in like whatever 10 minutes or something like that. There's no debate that it's effective. But is that person going to come back or not? Depends on the person, right? Some people's temperament and the way they're wired, they'll come back for sure. But other people in that same exposure and experience, they're not going to come back. And then if they don't come back, like, what was that for then? Like that's like the opposite result to me of what the point of doing a class, like an intro class like that, right? It doesn't make any sense if at the end, if the person is not wanting to do the thing anymore, they're not going to do it. And I think that's the one of the biggest challenges for the art. I mean, nobody's debating it's effective. I don't think they are anyways, but showing somebody something is effective or telling them it's effective and then having them actually do it, that's two completely different things. Because if all it took was telling somebody, hey, this is really, really effective, or making them feel it's very, very effective, if that was all it took, then every jiu-jitsu school would have, majority of it would be women and police. Because those are the two, to me, that's like two of the populations that need it more than a typical person. So how come there's not mostly women and police in jiu-jitsu schools? I mean, it could be for different reasons, but I mean, you cannot deny that there's two populations in the community that need it more. One would be women, right? I don't think anybody can debate that. If they do, then I don't know what is the metric that they're using to explain what population needs it the most. But I would say the people who's not bigger, stronger people typically, and that's typically going to be people like my size or a woman. And then what jobs would you almost as a prerequisite need to physically hold somebody down and control them, hopefully without hurting them? Whatever jobs those are, you need jiu-jitsu more than normal people, because normal people are not expected to do that. So if a person is going to be expected to do that, they have to have it. And how come they don't have it? And then I don't know, it's just very interesting to think about. Like, those two populations need it the most, but those are probably two of the populations that is like the least represented in most places. So I don't know. Whose fault is that? Is it the art's fault? Or is it the way it's being delivered?
I think delivery is definitely important. How we present things as leaders in the world and in the community, it has to be in a way that someone's going to receive it. Even if that person doesn't, they don't need to agree with you politically. They don't need to pray to the same God. They don't need to look like you. All they need to do is leave with the idea that they can come back next time and they're going to benefit it in from in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I do appreciate all of your time, your insight, and I really do appreciate what you're doing for the community. I think one of my favorite things to do is go on social media and see your interactions with these kids on your Instagram, on Facebook. The effect we have on the youth is so crucial, and we're raising the next generation for this country and for the rest of the world. You might be talking to the next law enforcement officer. You might be talking to the next mayor. You never know.
100%. And I think hopefully that's one of the byproducts of all the outreach, is that some person, what is some of the reasons why some recent legislation is so frustrating? One of them is because there isn't a legislator that I know of that has any kind of connection to any realistic training, legislator, politician, or anything. It's very, very, very uncommon. And if only there was a way to have a person like that experience some capacity of some kind of training, so they would be able, like, if you really think about it, people making decisions for things like that have no context for what the thing that they're deciding is doing, right? which is very interesting. So how can that change? Well, in the long term, that can change because a person who has something connected to some interaction, right? Maybe or maybe not through, not even through me, like any positive interaction that can happen from some officer somewhere. The byproduct of that eventually could be a person that gets into a profession like one of those, and they can reflect and be like, I remember when that person was very helpful and explaining stuff to me about why it is so difficult to do whatever it is that the job is because of this rules of engagement that is being presented. And I don't know, at some point it has to eventually, but by probability it will happen, right? We're gonna have police chiefs that do jiu-jitsu. We're gonna have politicians and legislators that train. And then once in a while, their interactions or their reasons for training could be because of some kind of law enforcement connection. Like, that's inevitable. But the question is, like, when is that going to happen? Like, how many years? So I don't know. I think the only thing we can do is think of ways to connect, and whatever the outcome of that is, like, I don't think there's a bad result of it. I think the only good things can come out of that. So however the thing pans out, whatever it manifests into, like, there's no way to know, right? But I think that's the neatest thing, when in hindsight you can remember, like, when somebody reflects back, says something like, wow, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever many years ago, we had this interaction and it was very positive. And I can't wait for the one that happens. I mean, I might be like 80 years old by that time. Who knows? But I think that's the neatest thing, because you can't replicate that without the investment of time. You can't create that without a investment of time that is typically a lot. And that's the whole beauty of it, because you can't predict that the investment of time will yield that. You just have to do it from the right place, and whatever happens after that, that's what happens. I think that's the beauty of it all.
Absolutely. That is definitely the most beautiful part about it too. So I look forward to the future impact you have on the community. I look forward to the future interactions that I'm able to observe even from a distance. I really do appreciate your time. I'm very thankful for your knowledge and your insight, my brother.
Anytime, man. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. And thank you to all listeners for tapping in today. This has been another episode. Make sure to check the link in the description so you can go and check out what Craig's doing on Instagram and Facebook. And just remember, Bellevue Police Department is hiring. Make sure you get in contact if you're thinking about joining. Much love, y'all.